All right, so there was a revival of interest of internationalist theory after the Second World War, when the extent of the communist influence in Eastern Europe dramatically increased as a result of the post-war military occupation by the Soviet Union. The Soviet government then defined its relationship with the Eastern European states that it would occupy, such as examples like Bulgaria, Czechoslovakia, Poland, and Hungary, as the basis and the base for the principles of the proletarian internationalism. People's democracies in these states, which were to oversee the transition from the fascists to the communists, except for Poland that was invaded by the fascists, and Romania and Hungary that really had no choice, and Austria that had no choice. Man, so by the early 1960s, this thinking was considered obsolete as most of the people's democracies had established themselves and were cohesive post-war communist states. Communist ideology then believed that the proletarian internationalism was no longer accurate to, well, Europe, and described Soviet relations with the newly emerging Eastern European Communist bloc as so-called, a new term was coined named Socialist Internationalism. That was actually international. According to Soviet international theory under Nikita Khrushchev, proletarian internationalism can only be evoked by describing solidarity between the international peoples and parties and not the government. We, the white man, must get the black, yellow, and tan man. And that's not gonna go over well, is it? No, it's not. Anyway, interstate relations fell as a parallel category to socialist internationalism. Now, socialist internationalism was considerably less militant than proletarian internationalism, even though we would supply arms and SAMs and, supply and fund and buy the states' resources. But as it was not really focused on the spread of revolution, but diplomatic, political, and to a lesser extent, cultural solidarity between the pre-existing regimes of the Third World, the Second World, and the First World. So, in essence, it's kind of soft power or the Soviets or socialist backyard. So under the principles of socialist internationalism, the Warsaw Pact governments were encouraged to pursue various forms of economic or even military cooperation with each other and Moscow and the Third World. So at the Moscow International Meeting of Communist and Workers' Parties in June 1969, 75 communist parties from around the world formally defined and endorsed the theory of socialist internationalism. One of the key tenets of socialist internationalism, as expressed during the conference, was that the defense of socialism to the international and the international duty of communists. Yes, that is very good. Yes, that is a very nice. Meaning communist governments should be obliged to assist each other militarily and defend others' common interests against the external aggression from the degenerate capitalists and the degenerate Maoist Chinese. The not very good Chinese Maoist people. We had a Soviet split, we had a bad breakup, but let's give... Yeah, I can't shoehorn this. Yeah, we're not in a good talking with Beijing right now, so yeah, that's why China was not invited, and we asked Taiwan to come instead. So anyway, by this kind of time, most of the history geeks would realize that it is the 1970s, and Khrushchev's successor, Leonid Brezhnev, was an even more outspoken proponent of both proletarian and socialist internationalism. So Khrushchev's successor, which was Leonid Brezhnev, was even more outspoken proponent. So Nikita Khrushchev's successor, which was Leonid Brezhnev, not Leonid Brezhnev, Leonid Brezhnev, was even more outspoken proponent of both the proletarian and the socialist internationalism. So in 1976, even though they were still sponsoring proxies and stuff, but Cold War really got hot in the Third World by the 1970s. Brezhnev declared that the proletarian internationalism was either neither dead or obsolete, and reaffirmed the Soviet Union's commitment to its core concepts of the solidarity of the working class, of the communists of all countries, and in the struggle for the common goal, the solidarity in the struggle of the people for national liberation and social progress and voluntary cooperation of the fraternal parties with strict abstinence to the equality and the independence of each other. Yay! Yay! I did very good myself. Thanks. Yay! Alright, so under Brezhnev, the Soviet and the Warsaw Pact governments frequently evoked proletarian internationalism to fund leftist trade unions, guerrilla insurgencies around the globe, send their people to build like projects like the Poles and the Bulgarians in... Oh, wait. Alright, so... Under Brezhnev. Alright, so under Brezhnev, the Soviet and the Warsaw Pact governments frequently invoked proletarian internationalism to fund leftist trade unions and trading blocs, the guerrilla insurgencies in all over the world and all over the globe. Foreign military intervention could be used to justify internationalist duty, to defend or support other communist states during wartime or join US-backed and Western-backed guerrillas or, civil war, you know what I mean, right? Civil war, back in Civil War size, proxy war stuff. So with Soviet financial and military support backing, a considerable number of new communist governments succeeded and actually assumed power during the late 1960s and the early 1970s. The United States and its allies perceive it as an example of Soviet expansionism, and with this aspect of Brezhnev's foreign policy negatively affecting the diplomatic relations between the Soviet Union and the West and détente or neutrality, even though the West was up to their own shenanigans, but at least be a little more covert, Alright, so outside the Warsaw Pact, Cuba actually embraced its own aggressive Alright, so outside the Warsaw Pact and the communist bloc in Europe, Cuba actually embraced its own aggressive Alright, so outside the Warsaw Pact, Cuba actually embraced its own aggression towards the theory of proletarian internationalism, with the primary exercise through the support of leftist revolutionary movements, especially in Africa, because the US and their backyard was not having none of that. None of that, senor. One of the fundamental aspects of the Cuban foreign policy between 1962 and 1990 was the rule of internationalism, or Rula de Internacionalismo, Rula del la Internacionalismo, which dictated that Cuba must first and foremost support the causes of the international revolution through whatever means were available and are available to her. So at the founding of the Organization of the Solidarity of People of Asia, Africa, and Latin America in 1966, Cuban President for life Fidel Castro declared that for the Cuban revolutionary, the battleground against imperialism encompasses the entire world, and the enemy is one and in the same one who attacks our shores and other territory, the same one who attacks everyone else. And so we say and proclaim that the revolutionary movement in every corner of the world and can count on Cuban combat troops and fighters. Yay! Hey, that was a nice Castro impression. Yay! Very nice. Gracias. Muy bien. So by the late 1980s, it was actually estimated that up to a quarter of Cuban nationals' military and their defense budget and stuff like that was actually deployed overseas, fighting with communist governments or factions of various civil war conflicts. And there's actually one that I might actually do, since it's not really that big of a thing to do. Oh my gosh, was I recording the... Oh, thank God. We're almost done. The Cuban military saw action against the United States while fighting on behalf of the Marxist New Deal movement in Grenada. It also saw instrumental and was also instrumental in Africa, especially in Angola, Mozambique, Zaire, during the Congo crisis, Algeria, Libya, even Tunisia at a point, South Africa with Nelson Mandela, and anywhere, Ethiopia as well, Ogaden War, Somalia before the Ogaden War, anywhere else I can think of, Egypt, Yom Kippur War, which was in that region, more Middle East, North Africa, but Egypt is still part of Africa, but the Arab world, but you get what I'm saying, stuff like that, and fighting several costly campaigns during the nation's civil war and other African civil wars as well. So anyway, guys, I believe that is it. I'm not really going to delve deeper. Proletarian internationalism today. Some political groups such as the PC Int or People's Communist International or Proletarian Internationals, the International Communist Currency, and the Internationalist Communist Tendency, formerly the International Bureau of the Revolutionary Party, which included PC Int, followed the Luxembourgian and Borgist interceptions and interpretations of the proletarian internationalism, and do some libertarian communist work as well. And so do libertarian communists, which is like saying, I want goose eggs from a chicken. They're eggs from a bird, but not the exact bird you want it from. Because libertarians are kind of like the anarchists. They don't really want a state or a state that benefits the ruling class, but more of a state that everybody could do whatever they want. But libertarians want money. Anarchists don't want money. So yes, I'm pretty politically illiterate, so that is just my hot take. Now, one more thing, leftist opposition to proletarian internationalism. Alright, so in contrast, some socialists, well, the video is done, but, might as well finish, right? So in contrast to some socialists, they have actually pointed out that social realities such as local loyalties, tribal loyalties, cultural barriers, militias, and militant groups and stuff like that against the proletarian internationalism. For example, George Orwell believed that in all countries, the poor are more national than the rich. So to this, Marxists might counter with the rich may have historically had the awareness and the education to recognize cross-national interests of class and boundaries, and the poor, those same nations likely have not had the advantage, making them more susceptible to what Marxists would describe as a false ideology of patriotism, or the working class, or, pawns in international socialist revolution. No, the bourgeoisie. They're pawns of the bourgeoisie.
So let's roll this after forgot where it was. So in contrast, some socialists may actually point out that social realities such as local loyalties to a nation, like nationalism, and cultural barriers and militiamen and a multitude of problems against proletarian internationalism. So, for example, George Orwell believed that in all countries, the poor are more national than the rich. Sometimes. To this, Marxists might counter that while the rich may have historically had the awareness and education to really recognize cross-international interests of class, the poor and some nations likely have not had this advantage, like third world countries, making them more susceptible to what Marx would describe as a false ideology of the patriotism. Even though you must have patriotism, propaganda. Wait. Alright, so Marxists assert that patriotism and nationalism serve precisely to obscure opposition and opposing class interests that would otherwise pose a threat to the ruling class order. Marxists would also point out that at the time of the intense revolutionary struggle, The most evidence were the revolutionary periods of 1848, which were the birth of nations, and 1917 to 1923, the USSR or the FSSR, then the USSR, and 1968, which I believe, like cultural revolution, not just in namesake to China, but also the world, like hippies, sex, drugs, summer of love, pretty much detente, stuff like that. And when internationalism was within the peak, internationalism within the proletariat can overtake petty nationalism as intense class struggles break into the multiple nations at the same time, and the workers of those nations discover that they have more in common with other workers than with their own bourgeoisie, except a person working in Sahara might not feel the same way as a guy from Baltimore, and a guy from Baltimore might not feel the same way as a guy from Virginia proper, or West Virginia. Is there East Virginia or Virginia proper? West Virginia. Anyway, so on the question of imperialism and national determination, proponents of third worldism argue that the workers in oppressed nations such as the United States or Israel, no, the oppressor nations such as the United States or Israel, must first support national liberation movements in the oppressed nations like Afghanistan or Palestine, before they could have any bias for proletarianism, internationalism. So, for example, Tony Cliff, a leading figure of the British Socialist Workers' Party, denied the possibility of solidarity between Palestinians and Israelis in the current Middle East situation, writing that Israel is not a colony surpassed by imperialism, but a settler citadel, a launching pad of imperialism. It is a tragedy that some of the very people who have been persecuted and massacred in such a bestial fashion should themselves be driven into the chauvinistic, militaristic fever and become the blind tool of imperialism in subjugating the Arab masses. Even though there's a whole lot of context to that, but for the sake of time and one paragraph to go before the tea balls, Trotskyists argue that there might be permanent revolution in the third world countries, in which the bourgeoisie revolution would inevitably lead to the workers' revolution with a national score. This can be seen in the October Revolution before the movement was stopped by Stalin, a proponent of socialism in one country. Might do a video on that, probably like Wednesday, Thursday, whatever. Because of this, the bourgeoisie in the third world countries would willingly subjugate themselves to national or capitalistic interests in order to prevent a proletarian uprising. And they were kind of under colonies, so yeah, they were kind of colonies, so way to rise up, dude. Well, I mean, in the sense that they won't know about Marxism or socialism unless somebody taught them so. Interesting read. So internationalists would respond that capitalism had proven itself incapable of resolving the competing claims of different nationalities and nationalism, and that the working class of all countries is oppressed by capitalism and not by other workers. Even though the Eritreans and the Ethiopians would like to disagree, Libya and Chad, China and Vietnam, Cambodia and Laos, maybe some parts of the Spratly Islands and the Philippines, alright, let me go for communists or Soviet bloc line. Alright, let me see. Somalia, Ethiopia, Eritrea. What else? Let me see. Sudan, South Sudan, and Ethiopia. Wait. And other such countries in Asia, Vietnam, China, Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam to Cambodia. China don't like that. Invade Vietnam. Then there is Indonesia. Well, not Indonesia. Let me see. Nepal, India, which was Soviet-aligned communist bloc, kinda. China and India, and let me see. Latin America. Not much. Is either one or the other a dictator backed by America, so not a lot of room to spread. But Chile and Peru, and the Shilling Path. would often clash before Allende killed himself. Yeah, he was not assassinated. He did not fight till the last breath. Anyway, before I pour this tea, moreover, the global nature of capitalism and international finance, or globalism, makes national liberation an impossibility. For nationalists, all national liberation movements whatsoever are progressive gloss and therefore obstacles to the communist goal of world revolution. But anyway, guys, yes, that is it. I'm going to make tea, and hope you learned something, hope you enjoyed, and peace out. I give this video 6 out of 10. Learn something. Or not. It's kind of up to you as the proletariat masses. I am not going to tell you. I am the bourgeoisie, so I'm not going to tell you. Anyway, learn something or not.